Hello, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of Ideas Conclave. For our panel tonight, we're absolutely delighted to have Kaya Genc joining us from Istanbul. Kaya is a novelist and essayist whose writings have appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, and the Paris Review. He is a novelist and is an author of three non-fiction anthologies. His most recent book is The Lion and the Nightingale, and that is which is going to be the main focus of our conversation tonight. But we will also be talking about other themes that he's discussed in his book. Thank you so much, Kaya, for taking out the time and talk to our students today.
Thank you, Riza, and thanks everyone for attending. I've been looking forward to this conversation a long time. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So, Kaya, diving right in, the way you write your non-fiction, essay, this book, this and previous one, it seems more of a conversation, a dialogue that is rooted, that does not aim to, impose your own opinion on people, but perhaps, you gather opinions of people, and you try to make sense of those. So what is your what was your motivation to tell stories in the manner which is not very common these days?
Well, when I started writing nonfiction, I think I lifted something from the fiction to the nonfiction, because in fiction, one of my heroes is Gustave Flaubert, and Flaubert's aesthetics has inspired me a lot, and I've been reading his Flaubert's letters and diaries passionately when I was in college. And there was this idea that the author has to be invisible in the text. The characters have to create their own existence, and the author's job is to create them, and then just pare his fingernails from a mountain and don't care about them anymore. But on the page, they come alive with their thoughts, with their worlds. They have to speak with their own words. You need to create them convincingly, and you have to see the world from their perspective. And so that was the kind of education that I've had as an aspiring novelist in college. And then I started reading James Joyce, and James Joyce's understanding of fiction, also in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, where Stephen Dedalus, struggles with different concepts of, art and writing. And so with that in mind, I started writing nonfiction. I was first writing essays on literary issues. And then after the anti-government uprisings in Istanbul in 2013, I was commissioned to write a nonfiction book about Turkey and its youth, and why were people so angry, why were people occupying the Gezi Park and filling the squares. So an editor approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing a book about the Gezi uprising. And the first thing that came to my mind was the film Rashomon, Akira Kurosawa's film, The Rashomon, where there's an event, and then the police interviews numerous people who have witnessed the event, and the film is a collection of their points of views, and you see that each has observed the same event with radically different points of view, because they have different interests, they have different prejudices, they have different connections to the event. So when I was writing the book about the Gezi events in 2013, so I had my cast of characters, someone who's one of those who started the events by pitching a tent in the park. And, that's one extreme of my characters, and the other extreme would be someone who went to the airport to greet Erdogan wearing a shroud and saying, I'm going to die for you. Just give us the order. We're going to crush the dissenters. And that's the other extreme. But of course, these are just two among my characters. So I have very liberal characters, very middle of the way characters. So all have experienced the same thing, but have seen it from different points of view. And so when I was writing the book, I just wanted to disappear, because I remember my own experience with the event in 2013 was similar. I was just observing, and I was thinking, wow, I should write this down. This is something fascinating, but everyone is involved in different parts of this. Someone wants to do graffiti on the walls, and someone else wants to deface the graffiti because they like the government, and someone wants to protest against the police, and someone wants to support the police, and everyone is like physically very involved, and no one is like writing down what is going on, and what is going on has so many different angles that you can approach. So I mean, that has been brewing in my mind since the events, and when I was approached by the editor to write about the events, I wrote the book Under the Shadow, where I tried to disappear and just allow the reader to see the events from these different points of views. And then I got some criticism for that, and people said, "So where are you standing? What's your stance in all this? Is it really a great thing that you just disappear? You cannot disappear. You have your own prejudices." So when I was writing The Lion and the Nightingale, I tried to make it more of a autobiographical book, just trying to use the word I more, my own, the kind of language I wanted the language to kind of stretch. When I was interviewing someone, I wanted the language to resemble their language, but then it would come back to my language. I tried to create this structure where my own voice, the tone of my own voice, would make itself heard repeatedly. Like after every character, my voice would return. So there's this kind of balance that you have to establish when you're writing this kind of book, because it has so many components and so many different perspectives. Something has to bind these things together, and that had to be my voice. So I wrote 2 books of nonfiction, and in the first book, my non-existence was the binding force, and in the second book, it was, I think, a kind of voice of mine that tried to bind those different perspectives together.
Yeah. So Kaya, another question with regard to your writing style, because it's again something that I was exposed to for the very first time, is that how and why did you choose the year 2018? What was the reason why that you came up with this thing that this is the year that I have to chronicle? Under the Shadow makes a lot of sense, because it was a watershed moment in terms of the attempted coup. Why this year in specific? Was it the bombing that triggered it? That you talk about the New Year bombing, or was it something that you already had thought of? That it's something that going in to that year you would be chronicling this one as well.
Well, it has different reasons. First, 2017 was the year in which there was a referendum about the presidential system, and the the Turkish system, the parliamentary system that we have had for almost a century was about to change. And so the government wanted a shift, a pivot to the presidential system, and the opposition was very passionately against it. And so it was a very, I think, vital moment in the history of Turkish politics. And it was just after the coup, and it it set up a stage where we were watching how the state would deal with the legacy of the coup attempt of 2016. Because I live in central Istanbul, near Taksim Square, and during the coup attempt there were tanks, and there were violent clashes outside, and bomber jets flying, and soldiers on the street. And after the coup was crushed, there were celebrations in the square, in Taksim Square. So as a writer, I tried to witness all these upheavals, and I wrote about them. I covered them for different publications, and these anti-coup events brought the nation together. There were big assemblies where members of the opposition party were invited, and the government were there, and there was a kind of hope that this terrible event would bring people together, and people would agree on principles, because during the coup attempt there was a kind of celebration of democracy. People said, no, we don't want military intervention. We want to defend the ballot box. We want to defend the parliament, because the parliament was bombed, and that was a horrible symbolic event. People said, you cannot bomb our parliament. And so there was hope that it would lead to a renewal of parliamentary democracy, a belief in Turkish democracy. But unfortunately, what we have witnessed throughout 2017 was an erosion of liberties and democratic rights. And so the government used the failed coup attempt to centralize power, to stifle dissent, and the kind of optimistic feeling we had after the coup attempt, when the opposition and the governing parties came together, they were crushed. And so that was a very sad year, and it was a sad year for me as well. I didn't have a great 2017 because because of the bombings in 2016, all the ISIS attacks. Even my barber said, I'm going to go out of business because all my customers, they don't want to come anymore. Their wives say, you cannot go to that barber in Taksim. You have to go to a safer neighborhood. So, I've been living here with these people, these, barbers, these coffee shops, all these little businesses for more than a decade. And I've seen them going out of business, and the people were moving out of Taksim and Istanbul because it wasn't safe anymore. First because of ISIS, and then because of the government crackdown. And for me, as I wrote in the book, I was single, I didn't have any child, I was a freelance writer, I could do whatever I want. And I noticed that people didn't have that luxury. They had to look after their families, they had to consider the future in a way different from mine. So I said, this is the responsibility that I have. I have to chronicle what's going on throughout this year. And it was a year in which I traveled to different cities of the country. So I was traveling a lot. And I was asking people to invite me to their lives so that I could chronicle how they lived. And so I took lots of planes to different cities, and I just wanted to see how people were living after the coup in Turkey. And the people who flew Turkey for different countries, whether they were missing Turkey and what were they thinking about Turkey. And so I just wanted to chronicle the aftermath, because the aftermath of the attempted coup, the aftermath of the bombings of Istanbul by ISIS, and then the aftermath of the presidential referendum that paved the way to the present political situation in Turkey. And of course, we didn't see right away what the presidential system would look like, because in April we had the referendum. But then looking, from hindsight, you can see that very incrementally these changes were being made. We got used to rule by decree, because of this extraordinary situation that the coup attempt created. People said, okay, let the president deal with this and clear this, clean this, whatever, and we just want to be safe. But I think afterwards the politicians misused that trust, and so I think I wanted the book to be a chronicle of that brief moment of putting your trust in politics, in the lions, what I call the lions. You want the lions to protect you, and you put your trust in them, and then you are betrayed because the lions have different agenda. They use these political crises to strengthen their positions. So, I mean, my perspective is the perspective of the Nightingales, the precarious people who have been rocked, whose lives have been rocked by the terrible events of the past 2 years, and who more or less believed in the possibility that something good may come out of all these terrible things. But as I chronicle in the book, it didn't go that way.
Yeah, so you've described the lion as military, the political elite, those who have the muscle of power, and you described the Nightingale as the soft arts, and the culture, and the ordinary man perhaps who wants to enjoy his city free of politics. The question that I have is, you talk about these two Turkeys, which are perhaps not, which are different from the lion and the Nightingale. The lion and the Nightingale is perhaps more of a power dynamic, but the two Turkeys that live side by side is the conservatives. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, you said conservatives and then it was muted. You said two Turkeys. Yes, I can hear you.
The two Turkeys that you speak about, the conservatives who want to go back to the old Ottoman style of governance, where and the lost glory, and who perhaps are we see are supporters of Erdogan, and the Kemalists, as you call them, and the secularists who want to Turkey to be a more active part of of the European Union, and perhaps ascribe to more Western liberal values that Western democracy espouses. So, in these two Turkeys, where do you see yourself, and how do you think that these two Turkeys will not implode, and that given the current situation that we have of polarization within Turkey, that this fine line can be treaded, which Turkey has tried to tread for a very long time?
Well, I was educated in a secular westernized school, and I grew up in a westernized part of the city, and so I belong to the secular and the kind of young Turk side of things. But I soon realized that there were lots of things I didn't like about the Young Turk legacy. The way that they dealt with religion, and the way they founded the republic, and through a violent revolution. And I am a beneficiary of the Young Turk and the Canalis, the secular tradition. But I was always, from high school onwards, I was always fascinated with the religious side of things in Turkey. And I remember, reading, for example, American fiction, where there's for example, in Jewish novels, Jewish American novels, Bernard Malamud and Philip Roth. There's this kind of character who is more interested in tradition and morality, and then there is this kind of Apollonian character who's more interested in how he looks and superficial things. In American culture, this kind of superficial character versus the more thoughtful character. And I was taught that as we Young Turks, the Canalis, we were more Apollonian. We were like more into the superficial side of things. We were just trying to look like Westerners. We were trying to look like Americans. Buying westernized outfits, and trying to show off our westernized musical preferences to each other, and that kind of trying to prove that we are Westerners to each other. That's kind of, that takes a lot of your time. This kind of like full-time job. No, I'm a Westerner. No, I'm more Westerner than you. That kind of I'm more westernized than you, that kind of struggle. And I found it tiring and problematic, because in Istanbul you have all this kind of tradition, and so I discovered the Young Ottomans, which was an Islamic movement of 19th century that came about as a reaction to the westernizing reforms of Ottoman bureaucracy of 19th century. And those intellectuals said, we don't have an issue with westernized bureaucracy, but you are trying to make our culture superficial. You are ignoring our traditions. We have this centuries long tradition of love, music, literature, and you just want to bastardize them. You just want to throw them away. And the more I read their works, the more I became convinced that the current day conservatives in Turkey have intellectual roots. They're not just jingoists or radical radical Islamists who have no intellectual heritage, and then I also looked at the roots of the Young Turks, which was also, very intellectual movement. And so in Under the Shadow, I tried to understand Turkey from that perspective, this clash between the Young Turks and the Young Ottomans, who both want to revolutionize the country. Young Ottomans say, let's get rid of the superficial side of Westernization, and let's create an alternate. Let's create an alternate modernization. That kind of not a militant modernization, not a westernized modernization, but an alternate modernization. And we were reading books by Pankaj Mishra and Edward Said, and all these critiques of militant westernization rang true for us. And so I think people like me put their hopes in the young Ottomans, the new young Ottomans of Turkey, the conservatives, the Islamists, believing that, they were also trying to forge an alternate modernization for the country. But we were wrong. We put our faith in it. And perhaps it's the same thing with Young Turks. When the Young Turks emerged in the beginning of 20th century, the Armenians, the Jews, lots of different ethnicities of Ottoman Empire supported them, because they said, we're going to bring more democracy, we're going to get rid of the Sultan, and we are not going to replace him by a general or by a dictator. We're going to replace them with democracy. And so there were lots of young people who put their trust in the Young Turks, but they were betrayed, because when the Sultan was dethroned, he was replaced by generals who ruled Turkey even more oppressively. So I think that we have to get used to these betrayals in Turkey. You say, I read this book, it's wonderful, it's a great critique of this of the current state of Turkey from this point of view, and you think that like-minded people who read that book, who come together around that book, will create a better system. But once they get reins of power, you get a different kind of authoritarian. So I think that, regarding your question, I am definitely part of the secularist, the Canalis, side of Turkey, but I'm there with a guilty conscience. And now I'm seeing people from the other side of the divide who are also having a guilty conscience, who say, we are part of the conservative, the Islamist side of Turkey, but we are not happy with how this is going on. So I think if you want to divide Turkey through those lines, what we need is people with guilty consciences. People who say, okay, I belong here, but I don't belong here. I know that I'm in this part of the country, but I'm more curious about the other part of this country. And so once you start your migration to the other side, maybe you won't make it there. So I've never become a conservative or an Islamist, but I've been looking there, and I've been trying to understand that position. And now I see more people from the conservative side trying to understand why the secularists have been so outraged over the past 2 decades about this government. So the more they try to understand, I think the more acceptable the critique becomes. So when I was in high school, the secularists were running the country, and then the conservatives took over. And I've seen both types of government, and I'm not satisfied with either of them. because they ended up committing the same sins. And I think that uh, people are becoming aware of the democracy deficit in Turkey and how that deficit replicates itself under different banners, and so uh, I think we had a kind of great experiment in Turkey, with the Islamists coming to power, because that has never happened in the since the republic was founded, and the republic had to experience what that would look like, and the republic also experienced what strict secularists, how they ruled the country. We experienced that. We experienced how the Islamists ruled Turkey. So we know more about how these kinds of governance leads to different problems. Um, but we have to learn from history. So in these two books, I always try to go back to history. If I'm talking about 2013 or 2017, I always try to go back to 19th century, to the roots of these clashes, these cultural clashes. Because if you don't look at history, it's just repeat. We're in repeat mode, and the more you live, the more you see that the repeated sins are, the same sins.
Yeah, you talked about betrayal, and there's the sentence that you wrote, and it stuck with me. I highlighted it because and it just makes so much sense that, and I think people in Pakistan can relate to it, that Turkey could make pessimists of us all, but rarely on this scale. So, given so it's when you're introducing us to the situation of Turkey, and the context of writing this book. You the this the shift from the secularist to the Islamist government, it just amazes me, given that there's something that you write in this book, and given it's just 21 years ago, like 22 years ago. You talk about an incident of March 99, where a member of parliament was not allowed to enter because she was wearing a headscarf. And for someone like me, reading this, it was unimaginable that something like this could happen in a Turkey, that uh, and in Turkey during my lifetime. I was like, what, 4 or 5 years old when this would have happened. And today we see under Erdogan, government representatives who adorn headscarves and represent Turkey at the highest forums all over the world. So this drastic shift, where a member of parliament is not allowed to enter in 1999 just because they're wearing a headscarf in Turkey, and for Turkey to come where it is today, this sort of change happens over a larger period of time, perhaps 3 4 decades. But for this to happen in a matter of 15 16 years, do you think there was an economic reason for this? There was there some sort of a boiling point that because such a drastic shift without any bloody revolution cannot take place in a country as diverse as Turkey, uh, just over a matter of 2 election cycles.
Yes, I think there are economic reasons. I mean, as a class, the conservatives were empowered by the way the Turkish capitalism evolved in 1990s. 2 decades after the 1980 coup. So what we called the Anatolian Tigers, the conservative families in Anatolia who challenged the kind of the monopoly of Turkish capitalism by the Istanbul bourgeoisie, the more westernized Canalis bourgeoisie, who were who controlled Turkey's manufacturing different industries, the rise of the Anatolian bourgeoisie contributed to it. So when I was in college in 1999, and I was studying film and literature, and our friends, headscarved friends, they couldn't, so they were allowed to attend classes, but then there was a big hole in our university, and a newspaper that supported the ban on headscarves put a huge picture on the front page, showing a professor and a hall filled with students, some of whom were wearing headscarves. And the day after that newspaper issue was printed, the rector of the university said, we cannot allow headscarf students anymore, because this newspaper just put a spotlight on us. So they'll be inspecting our halls to see if there are any students wearing headscarves in our halls. So our friends couldn't attend classes anymore, and they couldn't take the exam. So as a solution, I remember we started bringing audio recorders to the halls, and so we would record the lessons for them, and then bring the tapes so that they could listen at home. And then for the exam sessions, they would put wigs, and using the wig, they could just enter the exam for 2-3 hours, and so that they could pass the courses. So this kind of trauma, and I remember I wrote a petition. So I was a young journalist even at college. So it was my first year. I was my freshman year, and I remember writing a petition, and we started distributing it to different students. And also it was the time of the war on terror, the Iraq war. So there was great reaction to the excesses of Westernization and secular systems of the West. There was lots of reaction to George W. Bush and Tony Blair, and also the kind of secularism that we had in Turkey. And so there was a great march, anti-war march in Istanbul. And so the leftists and the Islamists, they were together.
Yeah.
They came together and they said, this is our enemy. This is a militant secular ideology that tries to teach us a lesson, and we have to come together. We have to fight together. So I think the lifting of the bans on headscarves and all the other injustices aimed at the conservatives, there was great relief among the left to see those bans lifted. So when in the future we write about these 2 decades that you mentioned and how fast things have changed, we have to find where exactly did they fall out, the conservatives and the leftists, because up to a point they were together.
Yeah.
They had a common enemy, but after a certain point they said, we can't be friends anymore. And after that, there was so much friendship and information gathered from that friendship over the course of many years, that I think it was very easy for conservatives to go after the leftists, because they maybe have worked in the same NGOs and they knew their weak points. You know, uh, they knew where to hit them. So I think for the leftists who aligned with conservatives over those years, I think it was a great betrayal. But of course, when you look at it from the conservative side, they say the left betrayed us because it was never happy with the system that we have built. They always wanted more, and they have crossed certain red lines that we cannot allow as Muslims. And I think for example, one of the red lines was, I think, the LGBTQI debates. You know, can we have gay marriage in Turkey? Can we have LGBTI rights enshrined in the constitution? And I think that was one of the important disagreements between the conservatives and the leftists. And of course, there were others, but I remember that one as a big disagreement. So I think what we have to learn from that experience is that the leftists were as angry as conservatives about the headscarf ban or other things that have been done against conservative people. And I think, honestly, the conservative people were angry that the Turkish state sent its great, for example, communist poet Nazım Hikmet to exile, or came after its greatest novelists just because they were leftists. I think the Islamists also believed that there was injustice there. You could see that at least among the young conservatives that we were hanging out with. They thought that it was a travesty of justice. And so I think what brought those people together was a common grievance against injustice. And that grievance can again bring democratic conservatives and democratic leftists together and help them again change things very rapidly. As you say, how can it happen in 18 years? These, headscarf woman couldn't enter parliament, and now she's representing Turkey in the upper echelons of power. And that kind of reform, that kind of democratic advance we have made, those things were put on a hold around the time of 2017, the year that I chronicle in the book. Someone said, I'm posing all the reformist agenda in Turkey. So that's it. That's all reforms we can give you. Live with that, and we won't do anything else. But of course, that's not how history works. That's not how politics works. Now we have millennials who want different rights and who want to fight for different kind of liberties. And so someone has to press the button again, and resume that kind of reformist path that we were on for a good decade, I would say.
Yeah, so like you drew parallels of the referendum result with the Brexit referendum, when because given how close it was, a 51-49 split vote that gave Recep Tayyip Erdogan a lot of power and transformed Turkey into a presidential system of government, and then you also draw parallels of Tayyip Erdogan with the rise of Narendra Modi and Donald Trump, and you even mention, when you're in your chapter, that you were in a writing retreat, and a friend came up to you inquiring about Erdogan's health because he'd fainted during a public gathering. So this sort of interest, the public interest that you see of people outside Turkey in Turkish politics, and then the kind of parallels that you draw, and we see sitting here in Pakistan, we see those parallels being drawn about other countries as well, including ours, given how the politics has evolved over the last 5 6 years, where political movements are seeking inspiration from each other. In other countries, Donald Trump, when he was being elected, he remarked that my election will be Brexit 2.0. So he was taking direct. We had saw Nigel Farage and Donald Trump, camping together prior to the election. So when, and as strange as it may be, the rise of strongman politics does not have to be always very similar. So we have Erdogan and Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, all three of them who happen to be on opposing sides of political conflicts all over the world. So we saw India meeting the Armenian delegation just to evoke Turkey's anger because Turkey was supporting Pakistan's stance on Kashmir. So we see how Donald Trump and Erdogan have been not on the same side of conflict in Syria. So with Turkey, edging closer to Russia in the region's conflicts. So the politics is not very similar when it comes to conflicts outside, but when it comes to dividing people, when it comes to polarizing thoughts, it seems very similar. And what do you think is, perhaps given you've been with people chronicling their stories, what do you think are the factors that perhaps push this kind of politics, and why has this risen in the last 5 6 years especially?
Yes, it's a very personalized politics, and that's something we were not used to, because the AKP was not a one-man party. It was a party of very different politicians, very different NGOs, very different parts of a rainbow, let's say. And so I think that that rainbow came together to create a kind of alternate democracy. And that was its allure, and that was what made it so attractive. But then when that kind of politics, the kind of politics that critiqued, let's say, the Enlightenment values, the militant secularism, the imperialist, Western domination systems, when that kind of politics felt under threat, it reverted to one man, a strong man system. So I think it was kind of a defensive reaction, because in 2013, all the people who were protesting on the streets were trying to advance the causes that became more vocal under AKP rule. So maybe there was in the field of academic freedoms, in the field of liberties, they said, you have reached 70%, but we want 90%. We want an improvement on this and on that. And suddenly the system didn't know how to cope with that kind of critique of its achievements, and the reaction was, I gave you 70%, and if you are not happy with it, I'm gonna take it back, and you don't deserve it. That kind of, how can you betray our coalition, our rainbow, or whatever, our alternate democratization path. So suddenly, I think there was a strategy to make especially the underprivileged people of Turkey, think that they would lose everything if the government lost power. If the opposition won, all the privileges they had, including the freedom of headscarves and the bans on different ethnicities, everything would just disappear just because the opposition won. And I think that that kind of urgency was turned into an electoral weapon. They said in the elections, if you don't want to lose what we have achieved over the past, let's say, 15 years, you have to vote for the government or it will just disappear. So there was a sense that the advancements we have made were not implemented, were not made part of the system itself, but were available just because those politicians were sitting on those seats. If that politician left the seat, that liberty would just disappear. So that shows us the problem with the structure. We, for example, in the U.S., you mentioned the Trump and Erdogan friendship or the conflict between them. The main differences in the US, the judiciary is very strong, and you cannot just you can attempt to disrupt the system. You can say that I'm taking away the abortion rights just because I hold the reins of power now, or you can in an election say that if you don't choose me, that liberty will just vanish. But then the judiciary comes and says, no, it has been enshrined in law, and it's not about people, it's about the constitution, it's about the system. So the system, if the system is vigorous and defensive of its liberties, then those strong men cannot harm them in a grievous way. So in the US, what Trump tried to do will be undone in the first fortnight of the Biden presidency. There will be executive orders that will undo the Muslim ban, the Muslim travel ban, the Paris Accords, all these things, and the system will just reverse those policies. But when you look at Turkey, it seems like the assault on liberties has solidified into a system itself. So if the courts go after an NGO leader, you have a very good understanding that that they'll be convicted, because we are living in an atmosphere of strongmen. I think both in Pakistan and in Turkey, whoever holds the reins of power creates a kind of climate that you cannot escape from. You act according to the imperatives of the ruling class, the political class. You know what the red lines are, and what defines the red lines is the president and his small circles, and they make examples out of people who cross those red lines. So you know exactly what will happen to you if you cross a red line in your country. And the judiciary are not there to help you. The line between legal and illegal is drawn by the president every day. So as I try to tell in the book, there's this kind of fascination with presidential speeches and presidential rhetoric. You have to follow every day. You have to look at the newspaper every day to understand what is allowed, what is not allowed. So the government just holds you in its palms. It's just you just have to know what the current party line is. It's much like in Soviet Russia. There's a party line. What is good socialism today? Who is a good socialist artist? What should a socialist education system be? The party decides on that, and that decision is um, shared via official newspapers and radios, and you have to continuously engage with that content to know what is the latest party line is. And that's an undemocratic system. You don't look at the constitution and know exactly what is banned and what is allowed. You have to look at the broadcasts every day, and then you see someday that now they're criticizing the government on this issue and nothing is happening, so maybe I can join them and I can also criticize. That kind of constant engagement with the government's pronouncements, and I think that's very tiring. And we have a great novelist, Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar, who said, Turkey never allows its children to deal with things other than its own. It's always Turkey's problems. You always have to read the newspaper and look at the president and know what the red lines are, and that's injurious to critical faculties. You cannot stand on your own feet. You have to always be in this kind of telepathic communication with the ruling party. And so I think in Pakistan and in Turkey, we are experiencing similar problems. On the one hand, we see a kind of fight against the military, a kind of anti-militarist struggle by the political classes. And when you look at the military and the political classes, you say, okay, even if the politicians are authoritarian, they're better than the military. It has to be the political classes, our representatives who decide on this country's fate. But then the politicians learn an awful lot from the military. The way they make politics is increasingly more militaristic. They see that they learn so much from the playbook of military rule. So it is that I think that we're lucky to have parliamentary democratic systems, even if it's just an appearance or just in name. But we should be grateful. Of course, it could be worse. When you look at countries that no more have elections and that are ruled by military, we have to be grateful on that front. But we also have to demand that the systems that we have become more democratic and create these checks and balances against authoritarians who are meaning harm on our democratic rights. So we have to find strengthen this because in Turkey the justice system is very extensive. It has a very long history and lots of wonderfully educated people serving that part of the country, but we have to make them independent and we have to make them strong. Also about the press, there are I think around 40,000 people working in the Turkish media, although most of them have been sacked because of the attack on critical press in Turkey. But we have all these people, who are just waiting for a good system in which they can operate in. So about those things, I'm grateful. But about the shortcomings of our democracies. Um, I just want people to be given the freedom to advance and to fix those problems that we have in our democracies.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and given where Turkey stands today and where Pakistan in some ways also stands, the parliamentary democracy perhaps provides a vent for elected representatives and the people for them to voice their concerns and not turn towards something that would perhaps have even more catastrophic outcomes. And uh, one can only hope that this trend can perhaps be reversed, and people are actually represented in rooms where decisions are made, and on tables where policy is discussed. But we've talked about the lions, and how Pakistan and Turkey have had a very similar experience with them. I'd briefly like to talk about the Nightingales, and so Pakistan has been overwhelmed by the Turkish soap opera industry. The first time it came in 2010, and we had these Turkish dramas being dubbed in Urdu, and being television, who has a very a cult-like following in the country. He praised this Turkish drama Ertugrul, and he asked the state broadcast to have cable television. So, and it took Pakistan by storm. The Urdu dubbed version of Ertugrul is the 33rd most watched channel on YouTube right now. What do you have to what do you have to say about this sudden rise of Turkish soft power, so to speak, over the last 10-12 years? We first had Ishke Mamnu, and all those dramas, Mera Sultan, and all of those in 2010, 12, 13, and now we have this Tugrul that has taken Pakistan, and I'm sure all other foreign cultures by storm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they're following templates of the West again. It's a kind of bastardization of the Western TV series. So, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it creates the template, and of course, it's sad to see that the Turkish history has been used that way, because we had the Magnificent Century, which was, I think, the best among these different series, but there's a kind of there's a kind of cult following of these TV series, as you say, but those cult followings resemble the cult followings of political parties, because people love watching the powerful on these series and how those who betray them are punished. And when you look at Game of Thrones, it's all about power struggle, and all these characters are trying to be the most powerful character. But at the end, the throne itself is melted. The dragon comes, and the throne itself is melted, and the series has this kind of message that this thirst for more power blinds you. It's something that you have to avoid. All these wonderful characters we have in Game of Thrones, they turn into these horrible autocrats, and it's the series critiques that. At the end, you don't end up finishing Game of Thrones and say, yes, I want to be like them. You say, they've struggled so long, and it was just for that throne, which is just a kind of mirage. It's an illusion. It's just something that destroys so many people's lives. But in our TV series, the throne itself is kind of it's put on a pedestal, and people say, oh, it's wonderful, you have to be strong, and a real Turkish man has to act like a sultan, and has to be very you should be defined by your will and not by your thoughtfulness, by your compassion, but by your determination and by your iron will, and and let your enemies tremble before you, that kind of thing. And of course, sorry,
by the fear that you emanate, that your personality should be,
yes.
the more militarized your persona is, the bigger hero you are.
Yes, and it's very sad because we have, when you look at the authentic representations of Ottoman sultans that were made during the reign of the Ottomans, when the poets were writing those kind of epics of Ottoman sultans, those are wonderfully thoughtful works. Even they were produced under the patronage of Suleiman or Selim or other great sultans. The poets operated in a form, the Ottoman divan literary form, that they mastered, and that had been part of their tradition for so many centuries, that they would create those artful, wonderful works. And when you read an Ottoman epic about a sultan's wars and experiences, you don't say, oh, this is propaganda, this is horrible, this is just a poor imitation of King Arthur or something from the West. You say, oh, this is authentic, wonderful poetry. But now we have these bastardized forms of Game of Thrones, and I don't really buy the soft power argument, and I don't see anything positive in this, because it's first of all, it's just you take a template just because it's popular and just because it works on the saga of Game of Thrones. You think that I can make it work on the Ottoman on an Ottoman cast of characters. It doesn't work that way. These that form, I think, is very misused because people in the media know that people will watch these series. You create a great poster of a hero, wearing this exquisite costume, he has a sword, and he wants to die for Islam and kill the infidel and that kind of thing, and there are semi-naked women, and you put it on the bus stops and over the city, and it's kind of a national thing. But I think that the Ottoman sultans are themselves misrepresented in these series, because lots of the Ottoman sultans were poets. They were interested. I mean, for example, if you look at Sultan Abdulhamid, he was interested in carpentry, French novels. He was a fan of Arthur Conan Doyle and all these. I mean, those characters are very interesting, and I don't think they make good material for these epics. And for the government to push this kind of content and tell other Muslim countries that, this is how we will learn from our examples, I think it's very ill-judged. They have to give them Ottoman epics, and you say, for example, if the Turkish government says we are gonna make translations of these Ottoman epics for the Pakistan readership, so that you learn more about Ottoman arts and Ottoman emperor's interest in these aspects of culture. That would be a very positive thing, and that would be real soft power. And if you just produce those books and distributed them, but those series are sadly they're pushing anti-Semitic militarist agendas and a kind of mentality built on conspiracy theories. For example, there's always some foreign force that want to dismantle our great.
Yeah, yeah, and it
Yes.
then permeates into a national psyche of sorts. Because I just find this the comparison and the popularity of Tugrul in 2020 in Pakistan, and a romantic drama such as Ishq Mamnu in 2012. Both were Turkish imports in Pakistan. Both took Pakistan by storm. And both had a very different representation of Turkish society in different eras, of course. So I just feel, and I really like your opinion on this, that what does it say about how people think today, and what appealed to the masses in 2012 in Pakistan does not appeal to the masses in 2020. It's a jingoistic version of form of Islamic militancy and Islamic supremacy that's more appealing right now, and people are flocking towards it. While and it's not like that Turkish dramas have stopped streaming on Pakistani channels. There are still soap operas that are romantic comedies, or romantic dramas or thrillers that are that you can watch on Pakistani television at prime time. But it's just jingoism, this these sort of dramas that have gained popularity. Do you think it's something that also is representative of a change in political or social opinions, or is are we just reading too much into it?
No, I think it's very carefully planned, a very carefully planned recreation of history, representation of history. I was approached by a friend who asked something about the death of Figani. He's an Ottoman poet, and he was killed, and because some of the verses he wrote, led to his death. And he was asking me about, my friend was asking me about that poem that led to his execution, and I was just Googling it to try to find it, and then I came across these YouTube videos of these TV series, the killing of poet Figani. There's like an outtake from the TV series. I think it's from the Magnificent Century. And then because YouTube has this algorithm, on the right hand, there was like, oh, the killing of this poet and the killing of that poet. And then I noticed that there are like 15 different clips of 15 different poets. And the more I clicked on them, I went to different TV series, historical Turkish TV series. And the representation of their death was so ugly. These poets were represented as drunkards who were just speaking against the Sultan in some shady part of Istanbul, and then some older, more loyal servant of the Sultan just takes a note and then brings it to the Sultan, and then they flog him, they break his neck or whatever, they cut his head. And the tone of these scenes, you could see that it was very like, yes, he had it coming. It's kind of like, how dare he insult the Sultan this way? The Sultan is always like, he puts his trust in these servants, and then they somehow betray him for selfish reasons, and the Sultan is all about such concerns. And so when a poet in Turkey or in Pakistan watches that kind of scene, it sends a message that you can lose your head, or you can lose your hands, or you can lose your skin if you write something critical about the ruling classes. And uh, the
It normalizes,
villainization, sorry.
normalizes this behavior.
Yes, and the villainization of the artist, the villainization of the Nightingale in these series, is horrifying, because when you read an epic like, I don't know, Robin Hood, or that kind of, it's also, the villains are always the rulers, and there's always some bandits who are trying to bring help to the underprivileged, and the evil ruler comes and punishes them. But here it's the other way around, and it's very unnerving, because we also have lots of epics in Turkey. For example, novels written by Yaşar Kemal, this great Turkish writer. They're great epics that could be turned into TV series, and I think that would make much more successful TV series, where the villains are the rulers and the heroes are the small people, the shepherds and people in small towns who are rebelling against the rulers. Let's make a TV series out of that. But no one dares, because they fear that that would be taken the wrong way. But when you look at how many copies, for example, Yaşar Kemal's epic sell, you'd be surprised. People love those heroes, and they're much more authentic. And I think that um, this kind of content comes from the top. The government wants this kind of TV series that everyone spends their time on, and maybe through more independent ventures, I think filmmakers will create different epics, and I think they will find a different audience. For example, on Netflix in Turkey, we have a new series called Ethos, and it's made by independent Turkish filmmakers, uh, and it's created so much content, so much commentary, and so much chatter, and so many articles since it was released a few months ago. And so there's this kind of thirst for genuine, authentic content from Turkey, be it about Ottoman history or current day Turkey. But when you see something like these TV series that you mentioned, that they've been government sanctioned and government sponsored and government funded, and I don't know, instinctively I say no to that. I don't want to watch it. Why would I watch? It's kind of like propaganda. So there's this kind of instinctive reaction to that. But I think that this is that picture is changing because of these digital platforms. The more independent filmmakers put their content on platforms like Mubi, Netflix, YouTube, I think the Pakistanis people will also see different epics from Turkey, that are not militaristic or jingois, that don't have anti-Semitic tropes or this kind of hate speech against artists and dissenters. And I think that that will be a good day when we see more Pakistanis engage with that kind of content from Turkey instead of these series.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kaya, heading towards our last question, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Now, we've discussed at length, where both our respective countries, especially yours, at the crossroads where it is perhaps today, where Erdogan seems to be gripping in power, but there's an economic crisis, and especially with the pandemic, it seems to be magnified. Uh, uh, how do you see these two turkeys that you feel that need to find a way to coexist, the conservatives and the young Turks, or you aspire for the more Western liberal democratic values to take the forefront again in Turkey's politics? How do you see these two aligning in the future, and where do you see these two Turkeys headed towards?
Yeah, so we are in a crossroads, I think, because we have come a long way. I think those two Turkeys are now more acquainted with each other. I think seculars know an awful lot about why conservatives have felt frustrated over so many decades. And I think now conservatives also have lots of knowledge about why the secular part of the country have been frustrated. And now uh, I think that there are some new parties that's coming out of the ruling party. There are some old allies of Erdogan are forming new parties. So there's a pluralization in the Islamic sphere. That's something we always had among the left. There's the Stalinists, the Maoists, the Trotskyists, and that kind of thousands of different sects. But the Islamists were always like more or less, one party and under one leader. And I think that wasn't very healthy. Now we have different leaders representing different tones of um, Islamic discourse, Islamic politics, and some are very democratic, others are more hardliner than Erdogan. So I think that's a very positive thing, because we have different options. If you are coming from a very pious family, you don't have just one Islamic party to choose from. You have maybe now five of them, and also the same um, happened. And I think the opposite happened with the opposition. The opposition was always uh, forming smaller and smaller groups and communities because of little disagreements. And now they're like, no, we have to come together. All the opposition should come together so that we can reinstate a parliamentary democracy in Turkey. So on the conservative, on the ruling party side of things, there is more choices and more pluralization. And on the opposition side of things, there is more unity. And I think that's very healthy, because a Kurdish party and a communist party and then maybe environmentalist party would have many disagreements, and the government would use those disagreements to divide them further and continue its reign. But now the opposition, I think, learned that we have to put these differences aside so that we can challenge the presidential system to make a return to the parliamentary democracy. And the Islamists have also uh, tried using new tactics. They say, why don't we have different parties? It's not this cause is not just about Erdogan or the 18 or the 20-year-long reign of AKP. We have roots in the 19th century, and we'll have a different party that is maybe more loyal to those democratic roots of the conservative movement in Turkey. And some and others find AKP's conservatism insufficient, and they say we're gonna have an even more Islamic system. And so these are good signs. And on YouTube, if you look at different clerics, for example, different Islamic clerics, you see a whole variety of Islamic thought on display. In the 1990s, it was just the movement of Erdogan's party that was available. That was a very unified front, and I think that they owed their success to that kind of unified appearance. But now we see that there are different hues, there are different voices from the Islamic part of Turkey, and I think that in the future we'll see even more fragmentation of the Islamic sphere, because people who were disenfranchised were empowered over the past 2 decades, and with empowerment came more access to knowledge, more access to critical ways of thinking, and that, I think, is an anatomy to unified movements. There are more fragmentation in the Islamic sphere, and that's a good thing. I think I can even say that more democracy will come from the Islamic part of Turkey, I think, who are not aligned with the government right now, who choose to take a more critical stance to it, even though the Islamists are ruling the country. So I think these are good signs, but as I say, we are on a crossroads. It can go the other way as well. We can have more, we can have an even worse year than 2017 that I describe in the book, maybe. We'll see. Whoever lives longer, we'll see. So
yeah. Speaking of the year 2017, is there any other publication that we should expect coming out from you, or are you working on something right now?
yes, I'm writing about a painter from 19th century Istanbul,
Okay.
who lived in Ottoman Istanbul, and a kind of figure who is in between worlds, in between Ottoman Istanbul and Catholic European capitals, and an artist who opened an exhibition in Istanbul, and who struggled with identity issues, let's say, and because that focus on identity began in 19th century in Ottoman Empire, and that kind of discussion about who we are, what should define us. Is it the Ottoman citizenry that defines us? Is it the religion? Is it the city? Is it what we do? So that has been a defining point in Ottoman culture that I've discussed in my books, non-fiction books, and this new book will also be about a painter, 19th century painter, who has to come to terms with the question of identity. Who am I? What defines me? How do people consider me? So identity, I think, is crucial to understand this culture.
Absolutely. And when should we expect it to come out?
I'm still writing, so it's these yes. So lots of research, and the travels is a big problem now, because you have to. I couldn't write this book this year. I couldn't write The Line on Nightingale in 2021, obviously, because I couldn't go to these different cities. And when you write a book, you have to have adventures. You have to be on the street. You have to go to this house. You have to have a misfortune or some good fortune. Something happens to you. But now you just have to be in a room and research. So the experience side of things is on hold for a while. So hopefully the restrictions will end, and I can also do the traveling bits of the book this year.
No one would have thought, when earlier this year, last year. I keep saying this year because it doesn't even feel like,
Yeah.
how times passed. That you were here in Lahore in February, and as you were talking earlier, and it never, there were like so hundreds of people, thousands of people, in over the course of those 3 days, coming
Mm.
together. And now something like this seems a dream that perhaps would come true in a few years, because given the vaccine rollout and everything. So one can only hope that we return back to where we were in February, and you can come back to Lahore. And For those who wish to read this book, I would highly recommend you all to read it. It's The Lion and the Nightingale. You can buy it from bookstores in Lahore. It's available at Liberty Books, I believe. And if there is there's another book that has been written by Kaya that is available in Pakistan, which is Under the Shadow. So, which is on which is chronicles the night of the coup, and the lead up to it, and what people and the politics around it. And thank you so much, Kaya, for taking up the time. I hope to see you and welcome you here in Lahore once again. And when once, hopefully, the situation with the pandemic is better, and for you to come and meet our students in person, and talk to them directly, and not have this faceless audience listening to you right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait. I can't wait this to be over and come back to Pakistan and see you in person. Thank you very much for this visit. It has been a pleasure.
Uh,
And thanks everyone who attended to listen to this discussion. I have to see you again on the page or in person somewhere in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and best of luck with your work.
Thank you. You too. Take care.